book is called My Baby Blue Jays. It is by John Berendt. I am not saying that name right. My Baby Blue Jays for Henrik and Olivia. I live in a white house on a quiet street in a big city, New York City. There is a small iron balcony just outside the window of my office, which is on the 3rd floor. One day, a blue jay landed on the railing of the balcony. It surprised me because I don't often see birds so close up. The blue jay inspected the balcony very carefully. Then he flew back to his wife in a nearby tree, and they chirped to each other. He must have told her that he'd found a place where they could build a nest. Do you know why I think so? Because he began making a nest right away. First, he picked up a strip of white plastic that he found in the street and brought it up to the balcony. And then he and his wife added twigs and grass until the nest was finished. You can even see the original strip of white plastic sticking out of the top. Very soon, Mama Blue Jay laid an egg in it. In fact, she laid 3 eggs. Then she stood guard over the eggs to protect them from cats or squirrels who might come along and steal them. I kept a lookout too. After a few weeks, 3 little blue jays were born. They settled into their new home and were very curious about anybody, like me, who took a close look at them. They did a lot of chirping and cheeping. Papa Blue Jay came back to the nest to see what all the fuss was about. Ah, he knew the little ones were hungry. So he fed them by putting food in their mouths right from his own mouth. That is how birds do it. And what do you think he gave them to eat? Bugs and worms. After a few weeks, it was time for the baby blue jays to leave the nest and go out on their own, to run around, to hop, and, best of all, maybe to fly. At last, one of the little blue jays hopped out of the nest. When the other 2 saw her standing out there on the balcony, they cheered her on. They too were eager to hop out of the nest. And they did. Before long, all 3 birds were hopping around the balcony. They practiced flying by flapping their wings, but mostly they hopped because they weren't strong enough to fly. Not yet anyway. Soon it was time to get off the balcony and into the ground. But this was a big step because the balcony is on the 3rd floor of my house. There is quite a long drop to the ground. One of the birds looked at me as if to say, "Well, it's been swell here, but I'm afraid it's time to go." She looked a little nervous, I thought. But she gathered up her courage and squeezed between 2 of the bars and out into the air. As she fell, she fluttered her wings frantically. Not enough to fly, just enough to slow her fall a little. She landed with a thump, not a bad one. And she found herself at the doormat in front of my house. Being a cautious creature, she looked out first at the left and then to the right. And then she took one last look back up at the nest, and without further ado, she stepped off the mat onto the brick courtyard and hopefully into the big, wide world. But first, she would have to make her way up a few steps to get to the street. She still couldn't really fly, and her hopping wasn't going to raise her up high enough to get up off the steps. What should she do? She thought about it for a little while. And then she did 2 things at once. She hopped and she fluttered her wings. And it worked. That was one step done, almost to the gate. At last, she reached up the top step and looked back out through the gate at the sidewalk. Once again, she looked to the left and then to the right, and then she took her first step out onto 87th Street. Now, her biggest worry was getting stepped on by people who did not see her. So very quickly, she hopped and fluttered across the sidewalk to the curb. It was much safer there. Okay, now that she was at the curb where the parked cars were, she thought she'd take a little walk with the rest stops in between. Finally, she saw a nice stop for a pleasant rest. She hopped onto a wooden fence around a small garden at the base of a tree a few houses up the block from mine. She was enchanted by a very pink flower. She had never seen anything like it before. And she took a little breather because the first walk out had been a strenuous one. Nobody would make the mistake of stepping on the bird here. I thought I saw a little smile of satisfaction on her face. Do you? Later that day, she came back to my moss garden to say goodbye. I told her I would miss her, but I would always remember all the brothers and sisters, because I tell you the truth, I couldn't tell which birds were boys and girls. But I did know that the big bird who laid the eggs had to be the mama. Now the blue jay's all grown up, and I'm sure I've seen her around the neighborhood, but by now she looks so much like the other grown-up blue jays that I'm not sure which one it is. She's probably one of the birds who fly to my backyard once in a while and take baths in my fountain, like this one. The end.